G'day viewers and welcome back to the channel. Well, you saw the thumbnail. And no, I haven't cut my shifter. That was just a bit of Photoshop magic. But you saw the thumbnail. Is that a short shifter? Stick around and find out. Well, if this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. I hope I can teach you something, you like what you see, and consider subscribing. Now, back to this shifter. Is this a short shifter? Technically, yes, but technically no. It's a short length shifter, but it's not what's commonly meant by short shifter. Usually when people say they have a short shifter, they usually mean a short throw shifter. What does that even mean? Okay, let's get into a bit of theory. Now, pretty much all manual transmissions run in what they call an H pattern. Why do they call it an H pattern? Because 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you have fifth, and down here is reverse. Now that's an H. You can see on the shifter there's actually an H there. Bang, bang, bang. This, obviously, being a 5-speed, has a double H. Some have reverse up here, some have reverse down here, but they're all the same pattern. The reason for that, because inside the gearbox down here, there's a series of gears, and they need to be selected, obviously. But the way most gearboxes are manufactured, you can only use the one selector to select as many as 2 gears. So you need to go from one selector to the next, and then the next. So the forward and back motion, that's the selection of the gears. But then you need to go from one selector to the other, to the next selector. That's called a gate shifter. So you've got your gear shifter and your gate shifter. These two things down here, I could have them the wrong way around, but you would have seen these, if you're a regular viewer, you would have seen these on the clutch replacement videos I did. But basically these two work in tandem. One selects the gears and the other selects the gates. The other end of those two cables you just saw, as you can see, this one here moves back and forth. That's the gear selector. This one here, notice when I move the shifter from side to side, this is moving up, back and forth. That's selecting the gates. This is not a very common setup. Usually you have a pivot here, down the bottom you have a selector, and on a lot of rear-wheel drive cars, I'll use the T5 transmission, very, very common transmission. It's set up like this, same way, but down here, this little ball on the end of the shift rod, the shift lever itself, goes directly into the top of the gearbox, and that's where all the shifts take place. There's three different rods, and each one moves 2 gears. And moving from side to side, moves from one gate to the next, moving up and down, forward and back, goes from one gear to the next. Yeah, I know, probably all getting a bit confusing at this point, but it all will, well, we'll go back to this and we'll just concentrate on this. This one here, this little piece here that comes off the side of the shifter, that's the gate selector. And the one down the bottom here, which is pretty hard to see, that's the gear selector. To create a short throw shifter, we need to make these longer, therefore changing the ratio between this center pivot point here and the bottom, and this center point here and the top. So what I have here is a quick sketch of the shifter at its original dimensions, and down here I've drawn plotted vertical lines at the ends of the travel of the shifter, and then I took the same dimensions and I stretched these bottom dimensions by 20 millimeters and plotted those same vertical lines. I overlay one over the other and we get this, and you notice the vertical lines are at the same point on both of those, but up here, well, they're well inside the black lines. Basically, that's what a short shifter does. It achieves a shorter throw for the same distance. It changes the ratio between, as I said, between this center point, this center pivot, and the end, and the center pivot and the top, giving you the same distance of travel down at the bottom, but a narrower distance of travel above the pivot. So why am I creating a short shifter anyway? Why, if they're that great, why don't they just come from the factory with a short throw shifter? The reason for that, you can't see him, but Broly's just jumped in the car. The reason manufacturers design shifters the way they do is for ease, for comfort, lack of effort. It's very simple to change that. If I change that ratio, the more I change it, the more difficult it's going to be, the more pressure you need to exert to change gears. So why am I doing that? The one benefit is for quicker changes. Here I have a variable protractor. Now I'll set that to 0. I'm going to put that there, right next to the shifter, in line with the shifter. Now I'm going to change gears. I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to change this angle. That's about the same angle. That's right around 30 degrees. 30 degrees of motion you need to go through every gear change. That takes time. Now, Donut Media did a video on short shifting the Money Pit Miata. Go have a look at that if you need a little bit more information. Not that unfortunately they provided a lot. I'm going in depth here. So as I said, the main purpose of creating a short shifter or using a short shifter is for speed of change. The trade-off is needs more effort to make those changes. But anyway, to achieve that, well, the first thing we need to do is get this assembly out of the car. Okay, now to remove this assembly, well, we need to get that off there. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts. As I said, we need to get this wiring off. But first, we need to release these cables from here. So, big flat screwdriver, and just lever it up gently. Don't force it. There we go. I'll undo the bolts, which are 12mm. Give it back. Give it back. Okay. Pop those out. Now, down here on the gate selector, there's a little clip. Basically pull that back and there you go, it just slides off and that's off. Get it out of the way. Don't lose the clip. Here's a good idea. Put it back where it was. Alright, and underneath there's this other clip. I'll show you in a minute. But basically there's two tangs here at the back. Grab them, spread them apart, and that should just slip off. There we go. So there's just these two tangs here, and they control these. You need to pull both of those back and it just falls off. Now we need to get that wiring off there. There we go. That's free. Here we go. Now obviously we're going to have to be welding this, and we can't be welding it while it's in all this plastic. So looking at it, this ring, this retainer ring here, is held on by this pin that is also the pivot for the gate shifter. So, and on this end it has one of those one-way spring clips, so need to get that off. Alright, let's start easy. Flat screwdriver. That's not even going to go underneath there. Well, this is going to be fun, because even the divisions, see there, they are really tight. You won't be able to get anything in there. You can barely feel them. So this bit's going to be fun. And of course I don't want to be too forceful with it, because I don't want to break the surrounding plastic. Well, that's tight. I can't even get a blade in there. Well, it's off. It's broken, but it's off. The good news there is that doesn't matter, because we're not going to use that again. Because once we lengthen this, we can't even use this pin. That's the next thing that comes out. That's out too. Throw that away. Okay. I can just put that to the side for now. Now that piece should just lift out. Key word there being should. Where'd my screwdriver go? There it is. There we go. And we're loose. And the trick to that is, yep, there's clips inside that collar. You see, right there is a clip. Let's just washed it out. Hold on a second. That needs to come off anyway. Now, inside the rim of this collar, there's one there. There's a bunch of clips that clip into these. And you've got to try and, well, pry them out. But that's off. It takes a bit of work, but well, it's off. No, I'm not going to put that back on there. Just going to sit it right there for now. But now the only other thing we need is to get this little cap off, and there it goes. Do that gently, otherwise you might damage it. Put over there with that. Okay. Now, that is what we need to modify. Now I know, yeah, there's splines on here, so it appears that the ball may move on the shaft. We're not even going to try that. We're just going to cut and put a piece in. And believe it or not, that was actually the hard part. Now what I've done in the past is I've cut it here, and taken a measurement there and added whatever length I want to lengthen it by and cut it up here. But clearly that's not an option here, so we'll start off by just cutting it down here and find a way to cut that off. And my worst fears have just been realised. This is solid. In the past, they've been hollow and I've been able to put a sleeve inside it. Looks like we're drilling these out. Hot. Yep, it's off center, but it's drilled. Now I need to figure out a setup to hold and drill that. This will be fun. Okay, well, I have it set in my jig, and then because it has a bend in it, I'll put a 6mm long 6mm bolt in there as a spacer. So now it clears the bottom of the fixed jaw. And now I can drill it. Let's see how this goes. Now comes the interesting part. That ain't working. Okay, so I've lifted it up, and as you can see, the table's as low as it can go, and the 6mm just sneaks in there. So we'll drill that out and we'll figure something out when we get to the 8mm. And yes, it's raining outside. In case you're wondering, yes, this one's off centre too. See if this one works for us. Oh, bugger. Okay. Need to lift the head. I've already turned it, so... Well, this is about the dodgiest setup I've ever envisioned, but I have the base raised up so that the shifter clears the bench. The bed is as low as it'll go. The head is lifted and turned to achieve that. See how we go. That drill's making a lot of noise because it's blunt as, so give me a minute while I go and sharpen that. Well, that was better. Okay, well that's our 2 halves drill. Now you notice I drilled them different sizes because once I drilled that I realised that it's just an old bolt with bent. I realised it's a little bit too big, but it fits nicely in there. It's actually quite tight. So that is going to be our centre, our main structure, and have a piece of this which is a bit sloppy. But that is almost going to match our exterior, so everything will work out because it's a bit sloppy. That way, great, I can offset it, make it look like it's centered at least. But with those two off center, first thing I'm going to do is put this in here. Well, I know my depth here. These, well, that's about 18mm, and that is about, oh, that's only 13mm. So 18 and 13 is 31, plus the 25 that I want to extend it by. So we need to cut that off somewhere around 60mm. Just shy of 60. What's that? 68? 58? Let's do that. Alright, that's cut. You didn't need to see that. Just bevel the ends a little bit just to give it a bit more. Now we're going to put that in there. Right. I'm just going to mark this. Just like that. Just so when I put it in here, I know how much further it has to go. That's bottomed out. You hear the sound change? Probably not. Okay, put that on there. And that distance in there should be somewhere around 25 millimetres. .7. That's close enough. So now, I need to cut off a piece of this, well, to that length. So, all those together. Need to cut that. About there. Right, slip that on there. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to go around and weld that in. Then I'm going to put the sleeve in, weld those two together. Then I'm going to put the end on and weld all that together. That bit's done, and let me just throw in here, no, your eyes were not deceiving you. I did actually shorten this down to 20 millimeters because 25 just seemed a little bit excessive. But now, we'll do that again over here. Right. Okay, I decided, as you saw, to cut it off in here between the ball and the main shaft. Main reason for that, when this sits in here and it rocks back and forth, or side to side, it has this channel that it guides in. And I didn't want to try and force that into there, because if I don't have enough downward clearance, I have to clearance out of here, and there's not a lot of meat there. So go out here, we're clear of everything. So I've cut that, not quite all the way through. I'll weld that onto there, and I'll break it off, and we can weld that under there. already the hard work done. Now we just got to put it all back together. But I'm gonna, that's a bit warm, so I'm gonna let that cool naturally, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. Okay, now that that's sufficiently, well, cold, we can start putting these all back together. So we need that, and you know what, there's grease in there. Yeah, we're going to clean all that off and replace it, just because. Although it doesn't matter if we leave some behind. Now, grab some grease and just, not heavy, doesn't need a lot. It's not a constantly moving part. Well, it's a constantly moving part, but it doesn't move much. So, just put some around there. Drop that in. And now, yes, of course, this is going to be, well, it's not. Okay, cool. That's fine. And the top piece, do the same with that. Because we've done all the hard work, now we've just got to do the fiddly work of making it all fit together. So that's cleaned sufficiently. Some grease around in there. And pop that back on. Oh, okay, it seems those clips are as hard to get in as they are to get out. So, here's the thing. Get a little dab of grease and we'll put some grease around there. Make that piece just a little bit easier to slide on. See how that goes. Nope. Still doesn't want to go. Righto. Just wants to bounce back out. There we go. It's going. There we go. That's back on. That all slides around there nice. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this pin is now not going to work for us because this piece here has to sit out here, and that, apart from the fact that I destroyed the clamp, once that goes all the way in, it's going to be too far in. It's going to want to sit in there. And as you can see, ball's hanging out the end. That needs to sit in the middle. About there. So, get that out of the way before I get it all over myself. We'll need it again though. A 10mm bolt. And that's going to go through there with an eye-lock nut on the end of it. But before we do that, we have to fill this space, and that's 10mm. Yeah, you see the problem? The problem there? It's bigger, so we need a sleeve to go over that, to space that, so that that sits in the middle there, so that when we move it across, it bottoms out, and we've got lots of movement on that, which is good. So, that tube I had before, which I've now lost, give me a minute. There it is. I've drilled one end of this out because it's just smaller than 10mm. It's about 9.56mm inside. So I've drilled one end out to take that 10mm bolt, and that's going to kind of fit nicely in there. So what I need to do is I need to centre that, centre all that, Pop that in there till it bottoms out here on that shoulder. Stay. That all looks nice. Then we'll mark that. And cut that off. Again, you don't need to see that. You've seen it a million times. Okay, that's cut. That goes onto there, like that. That goes in there, and that all goes in there like that. That's going to give us our distance, but it's not going to hold there, so we're going to need a spacer in here somewhere. And also, this spring needs to sit in here too. Here's another problem. These two little pieces here, they're supposed to be in line like that, and they hold the spring. Now that that's out there, well, we need to extend one of them. Let's have a look and see which one we can extend. I already know the answer, because I just looked and saw that is hollow. Don't have a piece of tube that small. We'll get back to that one later. For now, it goes on there, that slides in there. The spring, I'll just put on there now. That goes on there, that all goes in there. That goes out there. Now that spring, as I said, needs to sit around here somewhere, but I don't want it just swinging around everywhere. So, went down to Shelley's, and I'm going to cut this little piece, which once I clean up the burrs off that, which I'll do right now. That's sufficiently clean. That goes on there, and the spring goes back on there, and springs flopping around. So I've done another piece, but this unfortunately is going to be a bit long, so I'm going to have to work this down, because even if I knock that burr off, that obviously needs to be the same length as, well, that there, and well, you can see it's not. So have to seat that on there. It looks like I've got to run a drill through that too, because inside that is 13, just over 13 millimeters. Outside that, well, okay, that's because it has that little seam on it. Let's see if I can file that out. Still not quite. But you know what I'm going to do? Oh, look, there you go, that fits. So, that goes in there, and yeah, you can see it's going to be way too far. Once that goes back onto that, onto the shoulder of that bolt, and that goes on there, I've got a lot of material to clean off there. So I might just go and, while it's like that, go and hit it on the bandsaw and see what happens. There we go, it's cut down. I linched it off a bit just to clean up those edges, but now put that in there. That in there. Get a flat surface, and it's just about there. So we'll put that on there, put the bolt in. That's all going to squeeze down nicely. So now, yeah, I need to figure out that now. Okay, so got a bit of 4mm rod, and guess what? That fits in there nicely. Nice and tight. There we go, that's not coming out. So now, yeah, we'll thread that in there. Get that assembly in place. That's too long. Bugger. Bolt cutters made short work of that. Right, let's put it all back together again. That on there. That on there. That in there. Turn it over. We can see where it needs to be cut. So I reckon that should be plenty. Take it back off. Get those bolt cutters back out and I'll just snip that off. Now, as light as that is, I honestly don't think there's going to be enough force on that to bend that. If there is, well, I'll come back and revisit it at a later date. It doesn't need to be the same diameter. All that does is just locate that spring in there. But I'm going to clean up that end just a bit. Right. Now I think it's ready to go back together. Let's see how we go. We have a piece. That piece goes on there. There's the bolt. There's the bolt. There's the center sleeve. Right. Just going to put a little bit of grease on that center sleeve because that moves in there. Not a lot, but it moves. That goes in there like that. Bolt. That piece. Our spring. And that all goes in there like that. Now, aligning the spring, it has to go like that. So if we can hold that there, get that down over there, there we go. And we still have our spring motion. And I can now take that bolt out because I forgot to put the washers on it. Spring, flat, back in there. Is that flat washer going to fit? No, it's not. Alright, I'll leave that off. And we'll just put the nylock on it. Okay. So that's what gives you your neutral centering position. Just going to tighten that down and it's ready to go back in the car. See, that's a bit tight there, so I'll just back it off just a little bit. There we go, that'll do. Which means that spring wash is pretty much doing nothing. But that's it, it's ready to go back in the car. Just as soon as we reinstall this. Well, I've tightened 2 bolts down, as you just saw, but now we have a slight clearance issue. Only slight, but I did actually account for that. So let's head back inside and see what I got in store for that. This is, I think it's 32 millimeters hollow tube. It has a 13 mil bore. And I cut 2 pieces off that. Yes, this is overkill for what I'm about to do, but I had it, so I'm going to use it. But I cut 2 pieces of that and put a bit of that pipe, that tube I was using earlier, that 1/2 inch tube, I put that down the middle to close up the bore a bit. I've just got to clean those down, but you notice they're not parallel. I cut one on an angle deliberately. I'll show you why in a minute. I'll just clean these up and we'll head back out to the car. Alright, now these I'm going to put back here, obviously with longer bolts. That's going to give us plenty of clearance underneath. But the reason I cut them on an angle is because if I cut all 4 pieces straight and square, these cables are going to start binding up here. So we angle it, make the front ones shorter, it'll pull down in a way where, well, it now has clearance. So I have some longer bolts for back here. I'm going to go grab them and we'll bolt them in. So this tiny little problem here, these little metal shims that go in the bottom of the rubber, it's 8 mil, that's fine at the bottom, but at the top here there's just a tiny little lip on the inside. You probably can't see it. I'm going to have to go and drill that out so I can put my bolts through. Back in a minute. Alright, let's try this again. Okay, we have our rear two bolts in, and obviously that means it's a bit sloppy. So I want to put a bolt in there, but something's going to make it move around. So what I'm going to do, I have my verniers, I'm going to set it where I need it, and I measure down through there. Total of 19.5 millimeters. Now I need to measure the thickness of this rubber, or this shield, this metal guard, subtract that from 19 to figure out how high I need the front standoffs. So it got to come back out. They're out. I'm going to take both of them out because I've got to drill them both out anyway. But they measure 14 millimeters. So I only need about 5 millimeters across there. That's just under 6 millimeters. So you know what? Instead of messing around with that big hollow section, I'm just going to cut a couple of pieces off that. Before we cut it, drill some 8mm holes in it. So what's the shift angle now? We know it was 30 degrees before. Let's check it again. That's up. Set that against there like that. Talk about touchy. Alright. It's just over 20 degrees. So we took 10 degrees of change out of it. 10 degrees of angle out of it. How much difference did it make? Well, I'm just driving around the streets of Warwick here, and there's a lot of stop starts around here, so gear changes happen a lot. And well, I can tell there's a difference. It's not quite as stark as I thought it would be, but there is a very reasonable difference. Obviously we could have made that extension longer and we would have had more clearance issues, but it was nimble before. It's gone up. It's gone up a step. You just noticed one very small issue. Just have a look in here. This is where the back bolt mounts in. I'm looking inside the cage, and I'm going to go for first gear. See, it hits. It rolls around it, and it's in, but there is a bit of a clearance issue there. I'm not too worried about that, because as I said, well, it still goes in. And I don't know yet, I might even extend it more, just to give me an even shorter shift. We'll see what happens. So is all that, does it fit under the console? Let's find out. Clips are missing. Wiring's hanging out. But well, when it's in fifth in reverse, this sits out a bit, but I'm not worried about that. Well, that's finally done. I've been trying to do that for about a year. I just haven't had the time, and weather helping me out, and well, not that it's helped out this weekend, but I managed to get it done. It's done in a weekend. If I have one piece of advice for anyone who wants to try this at home, buy a second shifter before you start. Now, you can buy short shifters, short throw shifters for pretty much any car, but depending on what car it is, depends on, and I said this earlier, depends on how it happens, how you make it shorter throw. This one is the most intricate I've ever come across. I did one a couple of years ago, and as I said, all I had to do was cut it below the ball, cut it above the ball, spin the ball, and it just moved the pivot point down an inch. It also shortened the top of the shifter an inch, but it was actually pretty cool. But it was easy too. This one, yeah, not so much, but it's done. And as I said, make sure if you're going to do this, get yourself a second shifter, work on that. I have multiple cars here. If I couldn't drive that, I'd just jump in another car. If you only have one car, you take your shifter out, you're stranded. You can't go anywhere. Have a second one, work on that, and then when it's all done, pull the whole assembly apart, put the new shifter in, there you go. Thanks for watching. Hope someone got something out of that. Hope you like what you saw. Hope you learned something. If you did, hit that like button down below. while you're down there, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know when the next one's coming, and I can use all the subscribers I can get. Share this video wherever the hell you can. And I'll see you on the next one.